Senator Mike Duffy's bombshell allegations have raised more questions in the Senate scandal. Duffy is accusing the Prime Minister's office of a monstrous fraud. He says a second check was cut in order to cover legal fees. Jessica Human joins us in Ottawa with the details on that one. Good morning, Jessica.
Good morning, Pat. You know, the Red Chamber is usually a very quiet place. They have their question period at exactly the same time as Parliament, as MPs. There's rarely anybody in the media gallery, in the viewing gallery in that Red Chamber. But yesterday, I felt like I was at a Leafs versus Habs game. The place was packed. And it was also, you could hear a pin drop at the moment that Mike Duffy got up and speak. And it was for no reason. Again, as you mentioned, dropped many more bombshells yesterday, and he's really this Senate expense scandal takes a twist every time Mike Duffy opens his mouth. So yesterday, new revelations, and as you mentioned, the first of which, of course, is the fact that now he's saying the Conservative Party actually paid for his legal fees. And yesterday, in addition to making these revelations, he also backed them up with new documents. So one of the things that we heard yesterday was that $13,000, $560, that's the total amount of his legal fees, was paid by Arthur Hamilton. Now, he's the Conservative Party's lawyer. You may recognize his name from some of these robocall stories. He is the Conservative Party's main lawyer. So before I go on, let's take a listen to Mike Duffy dropping this bomb in the Senate yesterday.
One check from Nigel Wright? No, ladies and gentlemen. There were two checks, at least two checks. The PMO, listen to this, had the Conservative Party's lawyer, Arthur Hamilton, pay my legal fees. He paid for my lawyer, Arthur Hamilton, a check, $13,560.
So there's Mike Duffy. This is a huge revelation, and this is, this is a point that he's using to illustrate his broader point that this is all or never about ethics. It was always about politics, is what he says. Now, I want to read for you a statement from the Conservative Party. This is from Corey Hahn, their Director of Communication, and he's putting their response thusly. He says, at the time these legal expenses were incurred and paid, Mike Duffy was a member of the Conservative caucus. The Conservative Party sometimes assists members of the caucus with legal expenses. So there is an explanation from the Conservative Party. I think it's worth mentioning here, Pat, though, that this is exactly the kind of thing that the party is nervous about right now, because this is could potentially anger the base. I mean, what we're talking about here, this party money, this isn't taxpayer money, but this is money given to them by, my grandfather, people who've, been giving, imagine you've been giving a $5 check to Conservative Party for 40 years. All of a sudden you learn that money is used to kind of as hush money to pay off a senator who's been misbehaving, allegations of misspending taxpayer money. So this is a big problem for the Conservative Party, but there were other very damning revelations as well. Aside from that check, it also appears that Mike Duffy he says that he was very much coached by the Prime Minister's office on concocting this whole story about how he repaid that $90,000. He says he was told to take out a line of credit with the Royal Bank of Canada. This way, when the media asked, how did you repay that $90,000, he could point to that line of credit, co-signed with his wife. He also provided emails to this effect. But let's play a clip now of Mike Duffy talking about being coached by the PMO in terms of the lines he was going to use to the media and this whole story he's saying they concocted about that $90,000 check.
That line about RBC was part of a script written for me and emailed to me by the PMO. On February 21st, after all of the threats and intimidation, I reluctantly agreed to go along with this dirty scheme. The PMO spin machine was in high gear. Cell phone and PMO telephone records from February will show there were numerous phone calls and emails to me as the PMO developed their version of events and rehearsed with me right up until minutes before I went on television the lines I would use with the media.
Now, in part of the documents he tabled yesterday, Mike Duffy also showed some emails in which Nigel Wright is really shown to be kind of exerting a little bit of power over the Conservative caucus in the Senate, where he basically explains to Mike Duffy that he's been displeased by senators trying to broach the whole topic of his expenses without going through Nigel Wright. And this is a problem because this kind of feeds into that narrative of the PMO really behaving in a manner similar to what you'd think of, you know, the inner party in Orwell's 1984 or something like that. I want to end, though, Pat, on one other thing that I think is fascinating in those documents that came out yesterday, and that's the fact that this correspondence between Nigel Wright and Mike Duffy, it's from Nigel Wright's Gmail account to Mike Duffy's AOL account. Now, one thing that the PMO has been saying about this right off the top is that you will not find a paper trail of any of this in our office. And I think, again, like so much of what they say, technically that is correct. But this is an issue that I've heard MPs mention to me very quietly about, you know, this is, you know, something that is a slightly broader phenomenon from what I've heard. But staffers not using their parliamentary email addresses, specifically because it kind of alleviates the whole problem of a potential paper trail. So bombshells out of the Senate yesterday. The Conservative convention begins this week in Calgary. On Thursday night, when they convene in Calgary, I wouldn't be surprised if we see more documents, more bombshells revealed by Mike Duffy again in the Red Chamber, Pat.
Wow. Jessica, thank you.
Thank you.
Well, a new poll shows when it comes to the Senate expense scandal, public opinion has an early verdict to decide the senator's fate. The Ipsos Reid poll finds that 2 out of 3 Canadians agree with Prime Minister Stephen Harper when he says Senators Mike Duffy, Pamela Wallin, and Patrick Brezo should be suspended without pay. 65% of Canadians believe Harper's claim of ignorance in the whole fiasco, while 35% don't. This poll was taken 3 days before Duffy's bombshell allegations saying there was a second check given to him. Topic of our web poll, though, who stands to be the biggest loser as the Senate scandal continues to unfold? The involved senators, Prime Minister Stephen Harper, or all Canadians? Go to SunNewsNetwork.ca, cast your vote on that.